59, 10 days after she buried a husband she'd been quietly planning to leave, Sylvia Thorne sat at her kitchen table smelling of sour dishwater and cold bacon grease, with $342 in her checking account, a signed divorce folder dated 8 years back, and a creased county deed she had just pulled from the lining of his hunting jacket. She had spent 33 years sleeping beside a man who never once asked what she was thinking, only to sit here now and realize he had been pouring his Sundays into a secret she was never meant to find. The paper in her hands was a warranty deed for 3 acres of riverfront land, bought and paid for in his name alone, the exact same year she stopped reaching for him across the mattress. She had never heard him speak of it, but what nobody in this town would tell her was what sat at the end of that dirt road. Behind a rusted padlock on land she never knew he owned was a room full of wooden school desks and a leather ledger, and inside that ledger was a single unfinished sentence in his heavy hand that would prove his 33 years of silence wasn't emptiness at all. It was a locked door he chose not to open for her. If a story like this is the kind that stays with you, hit subscribe. And if you've got a minute, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I always read them. Now, let me tell you about Sylvia. She married Dale Thorne in 1991 at the Pine Ridge Courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon in October. She was 26. He was 28. He'd been fixing the carburetor on her Cutlass at Burt's Auto off Highway 71, and when she came to pick it up, he wiped his hands on a rag and said, "Runs quiet now," and something in the way he said it, like quiet was the best thing he could offer, made her say yes 4 months later when he asked in the IGA parking lot, holding a paper sack of groceries in one arm. The quiet in Dale felt like depth for the first 8 years. He'd leave a glass of water on her nightstand without being asked, warm up her car on winter mornings before she woke. Small acts she read as a kind of language, a man who showed instead of spoke. Then the showing stopped, and the speaking never. It wasn't a fight. No night he didn't come home. No morning she woke to find him gone. It was slower, the way dinner became a plate set in front of the television. The way she'd tell him about the woman at the dental office who brought her husband's lunch in a real picnic basket with cloth napkins, and Dale would say, "Mm-hmm," and the channel wouldn't change. By 51, she'd stopped telling him things. She started the divorce folder that year, not because anything snapped. Nothing ever snapped with Dale. It was more like a door drifting closed for so long that one day she realized she was on the wrong side of it. She filled out everything but the signature line, kept it behind the winter coats, then under the bathroom sink, then behind the sewing machine. Every few months she'd move it and tell herself the same thing. Not yet. Maybe after the holidays. 8 years she'd been saying it when Dale died on a Sunday in March, slumped over a small wooden desk 11 miles south of town, reading glasses on his face and a book open under his folded arms. The sheriff said he passed by the river. Peacefully, she pictured a fishing rod, the tackle box in the back of his truck. She did not picture a desk, because in 33 years she'd never seen Dale read anything longer than a receipt, and even that he held at arm's length and put down fast, squinting like the letters bit. The funeral was Wednesday at Pine Ridge Memorial Chapel. She expected 12 people, her sister from Hot Springs, 2 men from the county road crew, the neighbor who'd been feeding their cat. She did not expect the lot to fill. A man in his 60s walked to the casket, placed his palm flat on the wood, and stood with his eyes closed like he was listening for something underneath the hymn. A woman her age took both Sylvia's hands in the receiving line and said, "He was the most patient man I've ever met." And when Sylvia said patient, the woman's face went careful. "With people who needed time," she said, and moved on before Sylvia could ask what that meant. A younger man in a faded mechanic's shirt stood at the casket so long the line backed up behind him. jaw working, then walked out the side door without a word. Sylvia stood at the front in a black dress from the Cato clearance rough rack and watched 60-some strangers file past a casket for a man she'd been planning to leave. A tuna casserole no one came back to claim sat on the folding table by the door, the cheese on top already crusted. She had cried alone in the car before anyone arrived, and now she stood dry-eyed and could not remember the last conversation she and Dale had had that wasn't about what was for supper. The deed had been inside the lining of his hunting jacket, the old canvas one with the frayed cuffs that hung on the back door hook for 30 years. She'd been bagging his clothes for the church donation when her fingers caught on something stiff in the bottom hem. She cut the thread with kitchen scissors. The paper slid out, thin and soft at the creases from being handled. A warranty deed stamped by the Pineridge County clerk. 3 acres, parcel 27, Old Mill Road on the South Fork of the Current River. Grantee, Dale Wayne Thorne, purchase price, $1,200. Dated 8 years earlier, the same year she started the folder. On the back, in his block letters pressed hard into the paper like each stroke cost something, a hand-drawn map. Town to the river, 11 miles. A fork circled twice. An arrow left past a mailbox marked X, and at the end of a line labeled dirt turn, a small square, 3 words beneath it, keep it open. She sat on the edge of the bed with the deed in one hand and the scissors in the other, and felt the floor of her certainty shift. She'd been so sure. An affair. A man who'd gone somewhere else on Sundays because he didn't want to be home. 8 years of building a quiet case against him in her head, and here was a deed in a jacket she'd touched 1,000 times, and 3 words that didn't sound like a man hiding something. They sounded like instructions. Before dawn, she put the deed in her purse and drove south with the headlights off until she hit the county road, past the catfish plant, past the turnoff to Hot Springs, into country she'd lived next to her whole life without looking. Pine ridges going gray in the early light, bottomland fog. The river smell coming through the cracked window, silt and cool stone and something green underneath. Old Mill Road turned to gravel after the second cattle guard. Pale gravel, almost white, with a thin seam of grass down the center where nothing had driven in 10 days. She passed 2 mails boxes, both rusted shut, took the fork Dale had circled, turned left past a bent post with no flag. The dirt turn opened into a flat stretch above the river, and there it was. A single room, maybe 14 by 18, sided in rough-cut poplar gone silver. Moss along the roof seams, a porch of 4 planks, 2 posts not quite level. 1 window facing the water, glass clean, catching first light. A padlock on the door, brass, newer than anything else on the building. A dog on the porch step. Big, dark, maybe a lab mix. Torn left ear, a patch of missing fur along its ribs like something had grabbed and let go. It didn't bark. Just watched her cut the engine like it was deciding if she was the right person. She tried the lock, held, walked the perimeter through wet grass that soaked through her canvas shoes. Past a woodpile stacked tight under a blue tarp, still dripping, past a rain barrel at the corner with a layer of red pollen floating on top. A robin landed on it, drank, and left. She came to the river window, cupped her hands, and looked through the glass. The light inside was gray and still. She could make out a chalkboard on the far wall, framed in rough oak, words still written on it in white. A shelf running floor to ceiling, packed with books of different sizes and colors, some leaning, some straight. A wood stove in the corner with a blue enamel pot on top. And chairs, not folding chairs, not lawn chairs. School desks, the old wooden kind with a writing arm, arranged in 2 rows of 6, all facing the front, and at the front, a desk. Small, pine, on it a book lay open where someone had set it down and walked away. A pair of reading glasses folded beside it. Sylvia stood at that window for a long time. The dog came and sat behind her, close enough that she could feel its warmth against her leg. The river moved below the bluff, slow and brown, carrying a stick or a branch she couldn't tell from this distance. There was no other woman in this room. There was no betrayal she could name. There was a classroom hidden in the poplar trees on a bend of the current river, and her husband had been driving out to it every Sunday for 8 years, and she had buried him without knowing it existed. If you're still with Sylvia, take a second to subscribe. What she found inside that room is the part that changes everything. She drove back to town and went straight to Bert's auto, not because she expected an answer there, but because Bert's was where men in Pinneridge went when they needed something the courthouse couldn't tell you. Bert's nephew Calvin ran it now, a big man who'd told her once over an oil change that Dale was the quietest man he'd ever met and meant it kindly. Calvin rolled out from under a Ford F-150 on the creeper, saw her face, and stopped wiping his hands. Mrs. Thorne. "Calvin, I need you to tell me something, and I need it straight." She set the deed on the tool cart. There's a shack out on the river, school desks, a chalkboard. What was my husband doing out there? Calvin looked at the deed a long moment before he looked at her. "Your husband couldn't read," he said, "not till he was 36. Hid it from everybody, you most of all, dropped out in the 8th grade, drove a county truck 30 years, and memorized his whole life instead. Road signs by shape. Work orders by where the numbers sat on the page. Used to hand a clipboard to a man and say his eyes were bad. Sylvia's hands went cold on the metal. Library in Mountain View ran a literacy night," Calvin went on, "once a week. A retired teacher, Pauline Ash. Dale drove 45 minutes each way after a 10-hour shift, 2 years, never told a soul, not even me. He was 36 the first time he read a whole book cover to cover. That Bible you found the deed in, Pauline gave him that. Took him the better part of a year, sounding out every page. He picked up a wrench, set it down without using it. He told me once what it cost him to keep walking back in there. Grown man, calluses like saddle leather, sitting at a table built for somebody's grandkid, but he stayed. And when he finally got the lights, bought him as much shame for 36 years as it bought him patience for the rest of his life. The shack, Calvin said, had started as just a place. Cheap, remote, far enough out that a man could walk through that door without anybody from town seeing him do it. Shame was the whole problem. A man would rather his wife think he was a drunk than know he couldn't read his own kid a bedtime story. So Dale built them somewhere to hide it properly, and on Sunday mornings, 11 miles south of town, he taught grown men their letters. How many? Sylvia's voice came out cracked. 30-some, near as I know, road workers, mechanics, young fathers, wrote every name down, and the day each one finished his first book alone, called it the day the lights come on. 8 years, every Sunday. River mud and chalk dust on a jacket she'd never once questioned, while she'd been filling out a divorce folder for a man driving 11 miles to turn lights on in other people's dark. Why didn't he tell me? I'm his wife. Calvin was quiet a long moment. Asked him that once. He said, "How do I tell Sylvia I've been lying to her about Sundays for 8 years? She'll hear lying. She won't hear why." Calvin shook his head. He was scared, same as he'd always been. Never found the front door of that conversation. Kept the secret one more Sunday. Then he ran out of Sundays. The spare key was at Calvin's. He handed it to her across the tool cart without being asked. She turned it over in her fingers. Brass like the padlock, a little green with tarnish. She drove back out the next morning. The dog was on the porch. It thumped its tail once when she stepped out of the truck, then lay its head back down on its paws, like the visit wasn't worth getting up for, but it appreciated the company. She opened the padlock. The door swung inward on hinges that didn't squeak. He'd oiled them, and the smell hit her all at once. Wood smoke, old paper, pine resin, and underneath it something human and familiar. The same smell as the hunting jacket, the same smell as the pillow next to hers for 33 years. She had just never placed it in a room like this. The dog went in first, lay down under the desk at the front of the room like it had a spot there, which she understood now that it did. She walked between the rows of desks, ran her hand along the writing arms, worn smooth and dark where dozens of grown men had rested their forearms learning to make their letters. Some of the desks had initials carved into the underside of the writing arm with what looked like a pocket knife. Small, careful, like the men who'd made them were used to hiding their marks. She looked at the chalkboard, Dale's block capitals, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Below it, a list of words: thorough, neighbor, rhythm, the hard ones, the ones that broke the rules. The book on the desk was a thin paperback, a child's chapter book about a boy and a dog. A slip of paper marked the page. On the slip, in a handwriting that wobbled and leaned like the writer was still learning to trust his own wrist, "Mr. Thorne, I finished it. The whole thing by myself. Thank you, Lyle Pruitt." Under the desk, in a drawer that stuck, she found the ledger. Hardback composition book. Green cover, soft with handling, the corners worn round and fuzzy. She sat down in one of the school desks. The wood creaked under her, built for a smaller frame or a man who didn't sit still long, and opened it. Page 1, started April 2016. Below it, in block letters that pressed clean through to the next page, "This room don't care how old you are or what truck you drive. Nobody in here is dumb. Slow ain't the same as dumb. What gets said in this room stays in this room. You come back even when it's hard, especially then the names. Lyle Pruitt." Came January 2017, Lights on October 2018, Eddie Morse. Came March 2019, Lights on February 2020. Note, young man, fast learner. Wanted to read to his baby girl, did it. Hollis Deaver. Came summer 2017, age 68, Lights on Spring 2020. Note, oldest yet, cried when he read the newspaper out loud, said he'd been pretending 50 years, 37 names. She counted them twice. 37 men who'd spent their lives faking it, and 37 notes in her husband's careful hand, marking the day each one stopped being afraid. But it was the last 10 pages that undid her. Scattered through the back of the ledger between lesson plans and word lists were sentences that weren't about the men at all. They were practice. Dale had been practicing his own writing the way he'd taught the others, and what he'd been practicing over and over, crossed out and started again, was a letter. To her, "Sylvia, there is a thing I've been meaning to tell you for 8 years, and I don't know how," crossed out, started again. "Sylvia, I know you think I don't." Another page. "Dear Sylvia, I am not a smart man, but I am trying to learn how to say," and it stopped. The last one only a few weeks before he died. The handwriting steadier than the others, like he'd been getting close. "Sylvia, by the time I get the nerve to give you this, I want it to be wrote good enough that you'll see I meant every word. So I am practicing. A man taught me you can learn anything at any age if you are not too proud to start. That's the start. I should have told you this years ago. Every Sunday I drove out here, I was thinking I would come home and finally tell you what I..." There the last entry ended, mid-sentence, because he had run out of Sundays. Sylvia sat in the little wooden desk with the ledger in her lap, and the dog warm against her ankle, and the river running slow past the window, and she did not cry. She pressed the ledger flat against her knees with both hands and stared at the half-finished sentence and felt something's move through her that wasn't grief and wasn't relief and wasn't the hollow embarrassment of the funeral. It was anger, clean, slow anger that had been there so long she'd mistaken it for numbness. He'd had the words for 37 men, patience enough for a 68-year-old who cried over a newspaper. A front door he could always find for some stranger's shame, year after year, Sunday after Sunday. But for her, for the woman he slept next to, ate across from, shared a bathroom mirror with for 33 years, he couldn't find the door. He practiced. He crossed it out. He started over, and then he died with the sentence unfinished. And now she was insisting in his classroom, reading his private failure, and being asked to call it love. She closed the ledger, set it on the desk. The dog lifted its head when she stood, then put it back down. She was putting on her jacket when she heard the truck. White Chevy Colorado, dealer plates, a magnetic real estate sign on the door she couldn't read from this angle. It came up the dirt turn too fast, gravel spraying the side of the shack, and stopped behind her truck. A man got out, 38 or 40. Soft hands, quarter-zip pullover, the kind from a department store. Boots with no creases, Dale's nephew, Ronnie, his late brother's boy. She'd met him twice, both times at hospitals. Once when Dale's mother died, once when Ronnie's own father went in for bypass. He'd shaken her hand both times like he was checking it for jewelry. Aunt Sylvia, he said it the way people say things they've rehearsed in the truck. Ronnie, he didn't look at the shack, looked at her truck, then at the river, then at his phone, then at her, like he was deciding which angle to take first. I heard you'd been coming out here. He smiled. The smile was doing math. I've been meaning to talk to you about all this. He gestured at the 3 acres, the river bend, the shack, with a wave that took it all in and dismissed it in the same motion. I'll be honest, I think, look, you've got enough on your plate right now. I get that. This property, it's a problem you don't need on top of everything. It's not a problem. It's mine. Well, the smile didn't move. That's actually the thing I wanted to talk to you about. Uncle Dale and I had an understanding. Some years back, he told me he wanted this to stay in the family with somebody who could do something with it. He knew I was in real estate. There was a handshake on it. He leaned against his truck, crossed his arms. Now I know that's not paperwork, but it was his intent. Sylvia didn't say anything. The dog had come to the porch steps and was watching Ronnie with its ears forward and its body still. The way a dog watches something it doesn't like, but hasn't decided yet what to do about. Here's where it gets time-sensitive, Ronnie said, and the pace of his voice changed, faster now, the rehearsed part giving way to the pitch. There's a development group out of Branson putting in a marina and resort about 2 miles downriver. They need an access route and a staging parcel, and the engineers say the only route that works runs right through here. He nodded at the shack. I've been working with them. They're prepared to offer me, as the family representative, a position and a finder's interest if I can deliver this parcel clean. Which means, Aunt Sylvia, if you'll let me handle this, there's money in it for you too. Real money. 40, maybe 50,000 for a piece of riverbank with a falling down fishing shack on it. He paused, let the number sit. That's a life-changing number for a woman in your situation. My situation. I checked. Dale didn't leave much. I'm trying to help. Do you know what this is? Sylvia said quietly. It's a fishing shack. Do you know what my husband did out here? Ronnie sighed, a little impatient now. The smile thinning. Aunt Sylvia, I really don't have time for. He taught 37 grown men to read, men who'd hidden it their whole lives, for free, on his day off. For 8 years. That chalkboard is the last lesson he wrote. That book on the desk is what he was reading when his heart stopped. She let it sit in the cold air between them. The river made a low sound over the rocks below the bluff. The dog hadn't moved. And you want to bulldoze it for an access road and call it a fishing shack. Something shifted behind Ronnie's eyes. A brief recognition that the ground was different from what he'd expected. Then it was gone, papered over. That's a real nice story, he said. And I mean that, but a story doesn't pay taxes and it doesn't stop a marina. He reached into his truck and pulled out a manila folder, opened it, held up a single sheet. Look, I didn't want to get into this, but I'll be straight with you. I'm not sure Dale's estate is as clean as you think. He died sudden. Did he leave a will? Because if he died without one, this property goes through probate. And as blood family, I've got standing. And you've got a lawyer's bill you can't afford. He set the paper on the hood of his truck like it was a receipt. Or we do this the easy way, and you walk away with $50,000 and my gratitude. Your choice. The marina people need an answer by the end of the month. He got in the Colorado, backed it around in the pale gravel, the tires spinning for a moment before they caught. The dog growled low in its chest until the engine sound faded down the dirt road and the trees swallowed it. Sylvia stood on the porch with the manila folder in her hand. Ronnie had left it. She looked at the top sheet, a buy-sell agreement half filled in, her name typed in the blank for seller, a line for her signature. She could feel his words doing exactly what he'd built them to do, finding the soft places, widow, not much money, a lawyer she couldn't afford. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was no will. Maybe blood beat a wife in court. Maybe she'd lose it anyway and end up with nothing instead of $50,000. She felt the old habit rise up. The habit of 33 years, the habit of going quiet, of not making the fight, of sliding the folder a little closer to the front of the drawer and telling herself not yet. Then she looked at the chalkboard through the window. The quick brown fox, the word thorough in Dale's careful hand. A man taught me you can learn anything at any age if you are not too proud to start at the start. Sylvia Thorne was 59 years old. She had never fought for anything in her life. She folded the buy-sell agreement once, twice, and put it in the pocket of her jacket. If stories like this one are pulling at something in you, subscribe and stick around. Because what Sylvia did next wasn't loud, and it wasn't pretty. And it didn't look like justice until it was already done. She drove to Calvin's, told him the whole thing. His jaw went tight when she got to Ronnie's name. That boy's been a buzzard since he could walk. Showed up at his own daddy's funeral asking who got the truck. Dale had a will, Sylvia said. It wasn't a question. Calvin looked at her for a long time. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out a ring of keys and unlocked the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet and took out a flat envelope, cream-colored, with a notary seal in the corner. I witnessed it 2 years ago. Pauline Ash witnessed it too. He had it notarized at the First National in Mountain View the same day. Told me to hold on to a copy in case something happened to the one he kept. Sylvia opened the envelope. A single sheet. Dale's block capitals, neater than anything she'd ever seen him write because he'd been practicing for years by then. I, Dale Wayne Thorne, being of sound mind, leave everything I own, including the 3 acres and building on Old Mill Road, to my wife, Sylvia. I want the school kept open as long as she is able. Below it, 3 signatures, Calvin's and Pauline Ash's. The notary stamp dated it 2 years ago, March. The same March, she'd moved the divorce folder from behind the winter coats to behind the sewing machine and told herself maybe after Easter, keep it open. The map hadn't been an instruction to a stranger. It had been an instruction to her. He'd known she'd be the one to find it. He'd been counting on it. He'd written a will the same year she was planning to leave him, and he'd never said a word about that either. She set the envelope on the tool cart. The relief that moved through her was not total. It was specific, a locked door opening on one room while another room stayed shut. He had protected her. He had made sure the land and the school would come to her. But he had done it the same way he did everything. Quietly, without her, treating her like something to be managed rather than someone to be trusted. Calvin, she said, why didn't you just hand me this the day of the funeral? He didn't answer right away. He picked up the wrench again, set it down again, the way he did when a thing was hard to say. Dale made me promise, he said finally. Said if anything happened to him, I wasn't to give it to you unless you came asking on your own. Said you had to want to know, not just get handed it like a check. Said a woman ought to find her own way to the truth. Or it don't the same mean the thing once she's got it. Sylvia felt something tighten in her chest that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite gratitude. That's a hell of a thing to leave a man's friend in charge of. Tell me about it, Calvin said. I about gave it to you 3 times already, had it in my coat pocket at the funeral, couldn't make myself do it. Kept hearing him in my head saying, not yet, Calvin. Let her come to it. She almost told him she'd nearly given up before she'd come, that she'd sat in her truck outside Bert's for 10 minutes since that morning, deciding whether it was worth the drive. She didn't say it, but she understood for the first time that the will had been waiting on her the whole time, the same way the shack had. Nobody had been going to hand her anything. She'd had to drive the 11 miles herself twice now before either door opened. She could have stopped there. The will was airtight. Ronnie had no standing, and once he learned about the notarized copy on file at the bank, he'd fold. She could have let it die quiet, the way Dale did everything quiet. But Ronnie had filed a petition with the county to have the parcel rezoned, an easement condemnation request. There was a planning commission meeting on the last Thursday of the month, and Calvin told her Ronnie had already been calling in favors, getting the marina people to send letters, pressuring the commissioners to move fast before the widow figured out what she had. He's trying to railroad it before you can breathe, Calvin said, so Sylvia went to see the men. Not all of them. Calvin made calls. 7 could come. They gathered in the back room of the Pine Ridge Cafe on a Tuesday evening, around a table that smelled like bacon, grease, and coffee that had been on the burner too long. Lyle Prout, the truck driver, Eddie Morse, the young father, Hollis Deaver, 68 years old now, 71, lean and weathered with hands like roots, and 4 others whose names she was still learning. She told them what Ronnie wanted. She told them about the will. Then she asked them for something she knew was the hardest thing in the world for men like them to give. She asked them to come to the Planning Commission meeting and say what Dale had done for them. To stand up in a room full of people and admit, with their names attached, that there had been a time not so long ago when they could not read. The room got quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. Hollis Deaver looked at the table, looked at his hands, looked at the other men. I pretended for 50 years, he said. I'm done pretending. If standing up and saying I couldn't read till I was 68 is what it takes to save the place that fixed it, then I'll stand up. Dale never let me feel small in that room. I'll be damned if I let some boy in a white truck call it a fishing shack. One by one, the others nodded. But Sylvia shook her head. No, she said. They looked at her. I'm not asking you to do that. Hollis frowned. Mrs. Thorne. Dale's first rule was you don't tell nobody who you saw here. I'm not going to be the one who breaks it, not even to save the place. Eddie Morse leaned forward. Then how do we stop it? Sylvia took the notarized will out of her purse and set it on the table. The paper made a small sound against the laminate. Ronnie's whole case depends on the county thinking this land is in dispute, that there's no clear owner, that the widow is confused and alone and can't afford to fight. The moment the county clerk has this will on file, his petition falls apart. No public hearing needed, no standing, no story. She looked at each of them. I'm going to mail this to the county clerk tomorrow morning, certified with a cover letter. By the time Ronnie shows up at that meeting, it'll already be done. Quiet, the way Dale would have wanted it. Hollis sat back. Something moved across his face. Not relief exactly, but something close to it. The look of a man who'd been bracing for a public exposure and had just been handed a way out he didn't have to be ashamed to take. He'd have liked that, Hollis said quietly. The quiet part. The next morning, Sylvia put the will in a certified mail envelope at the Pine Ridge post office. She wrote the cover letter herself at the kitchen table in her own hand, short, direct. I am the rightful owner of parcel 27, Old Mill Road, per the attached notarized last will and testament of Dale Wayne Thorne, filed for record. Any petition claiming otherwise is without standing. She signed it, sealed it, and handed it to Connie behind the counter. Connie weighed it. Certified? Certified. Then Sylvia drove home and sat in the kitchen and waited. She did not go to the planning commission meeting on Thursday. She did not need to. Calvin called her that evening. It's done. Ronnie showed up with his marina people and their fancy site plan, and the clerk had already filed your will that morning. The chairman asked Ronnie if he had any documentation contesting the will. He didn't. Meeting lasted 11 minutes. They tabled the easement indefinitely. Did Ronnie say anything? Not a word. Put his papers in his folder and walked out. Sylvia hung up the phone, sat at the kitchen table in the same chair where she'd sat 10 days ago with $342, a deed, and a divorce folder. The dishwater smell was still there, the bacon grease, the same light from the same window falling on the same linoleum, but something was different, and it wasn't the will. Over the next 2 weeks, the men came, not to a meeting, not to a hearing, one at a time in the evenings to the shack. Hollis came first, stood on the porch with his hat in his hands and said, "I just wanted to see it again, make sure it was still here." He looked at the chalkboard for a long time. "I read to my grandbabies now," he said. "You know what's worth to a man? There ain't a number on it." Eddie came with his daughter, 4 years old, on his shoulders. He didn't say much, just stood at the window and let the girl look at the desks, and when she asked what they were for, he said, "That's where daddies learn to be brave." The girl wasn't listening. She was watching the dog, which had come to sit at the bottom of the porch steps with its tongue out. Lyle Pruitt came on a Saturday. The big trucker who'd found Dale, he couldn't talk at first, sat on the porch step next to the dog and scratched behind its torn ear. "Dale named that dog," he finally said. "Showed up out here half-starved couple years back, torn up from a trap. Dale fed him for 2 weeks before he'd let anybody touch him. I asked what we ought to call him, and Dale thought on it a long time, longer than a dog's name needed, and said, 'Carver.' Man's got to cut his own way out of a bad spot, same as the rest of us in here." Lyle laughed, wet-eyed. That was Dale all over. Quietest man I ever knew, and the most words I ever learned came out of his classroom. He looked at Sylvia. "I'm sorry I'm the one found him, ma'am." But his glasses were on, and his book was open, and there was a little smile on his face. He died in the one place on this earth where he wasn't pretending to be anything but exactly what he was. Sylvia didn't answer. She didn't need to. She stood in the doorway of the shack with her arms crossed and watched the river and let the men come and go, each one carrying a piece of her husband she'd never been given. And the man who assembled himself out of all those pieces was not the dull, distant figure she'd been quietly leaving for 8 years. He was something else, something she didn't have a word for yet, something that included both the patience and the silence, both the classroom and the unfinished letter, both the man who taught 37 strangers to read and the man who couldn't find the courage to speak to his own wife. She was not going to forgive him for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she was going to keep the school open because keeping it open was the one concrete thing she could do with the rest of her life that wasn't about him or about her or about the 33 years they'd wasted. It was about the next man who walked through that door unable to read a bedtime story to his child. On a Thursday afternoon in April, 3 weeks after she'd mailed the will, Sylvia drove out to the shack with a bucket of water, a rag, and the folded buy-sell agreement Ronnie had left on the hood of his truck. She unlocked the padlock, opened the door. The dog came in and lay down under the desk. She went to the wood stove, opened the door, laid the buy-sell agreement inside, one sheet at a time, and touched a match to the corner. The paper caught, curled, and burned. Ronnie's typed name blackened and flaked. The number $50,000 shimmered for a moment in the heat and then was gone. She watched it until nothing was left but gray ash and the faint smell of chemicals. Then she took the rag and the bucket to the chalkboard. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Thorough, neighbor, rhythm. All of it still there in Dale's block letters, white on green, untouched since the day he'd written it. She wet the rag, wiped the left half of the board clean. The chalk dust came away in pale streaks, leaving a dark green rectangle on the left and Dale's words still sharp on the right. Half a board, half a lesson. The part he'd finished and the part he hadn't. She set the rag on the ledge, looked at it for a moment. The dog lifted its head, watching her, then put it back down. She turned off the stove, closed the padlock, drove home with the windows down and the river smell fading behind her, and the kitchen was exactly as she'd left it, dishwater and bacon grease in the same light. But the divorce folder was no longer behind the sewing machine. She'd thrown it in the stove at the shack, too. The following Sunday, she drove back out before light, the way Dale used to. She didn't know how to teach anybody anything. She knew that much walking in. She set the blue enamel pot on the stove anyway, lit it, and sat down at small behind desk because somebody had to be sitting there when the first man came, even if all she could offer him that morning was coffee and an unlocked door. Nobody came that first Sunday. She sat there until noon and then drove home. Lyle came the Sunday after, not to read, just to ask if the stove was still working. She said it was. He sat down at one of the desks anyway, turned a pencil over in his hands for a while, and didn't leave for an hour. It wasn't much. But the lights were on, and somebody had seen them on from the road, and that, Sylvia decided, was a start she wasn't too proud to make.